So we'll give people a minute to kind of join into our webinar here. Looks like we've got some friends on here as well that we may have worked with in the past. So always interesting to see our friends joining us. So thank you everybody for joining us today. Another episode with Receivables Info. Today's webinar, I thought we wanted to do something a little bit different, and I wanted to bring on some people from our team to have a conversation. And so with us today, I've got Katalina Dawson and Katie Head on the Receivables Info and Branding Arc teams. And it felt very appropriate to have them on here today as they have a lot of experience in the B2B marketing problems that we see across the receivables management space. So just to kind of kick it off here today, ladies, maybe Katie, we could start with you. Could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Sure. I actually went back to work after being a stay-at-home mom as a temp, and I landed at Investinet in Greenville. Still live in Greenville, and I was there for 3 years, mostly in disputes. I loved working disputes, and then I came to Branding Arc, and the opportunity to be between the clients and the servicers and see what consumers had to say. All of that came together and helped me know how to write to our audiences.
It's a really interesting perspective that you've been able to bring to the table because having sat in that master servicer role and getting some visibility into how those things actually function, I think is incredibly important. Catalina, how about from your perspective? Can you tell everyone a little about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Absolutely. So, for anybody in the industry who does know me, you probably know I have a very odd background. I was a professional magician. I was a rent-a-princess for years. So getting to the industry was a little different for me. I started in the industry about 2 years ago with Prodigal, who provides AI. And I started with Branding Arc about 5, 6 months ago. It's been fantastic, and I'm getting more and more involved in the industry now. In fact, I'm currently working on my RMAI certification, which I'm really excited about, and I'm on one of the committees for RMAI. So I love getting involved here.
So tell everybody a little bit about what it is that you were doing over at Prodigal, because I think that helps set the stage a little bit for some of the things that we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. So I was the event manager at Prodigal, and I have a background in marketing. That's how I got into this whole industry, was with a full marketing background. And that does include, of course, a little bit of magic and those other things. But copywriting, events, that's what I really knew in marketing. And it's grown from there.
And that's how we really got to know each other as well, was through a marketing engagement and putting together an event very last second, right? Being able to actually coordinate, organize, and execute quickly, make a plan and execute it. I believe one of our guests would say that. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the kind of the marketplace and receivables management, how we are so unique as an industry, and this misconception that we're constantly dealing with between the marketing and sales functions in a business. So let's talk a little bit about, what those differences really are. You're both of you spend a lot of time on the marketing side of the equation, but necessarily working with salespeople. And you've had an opportunity to go, both of you were at the RMAI conference back in February. Let's talk a little bit about what's different between the role of a salesperson and the role of a marketing team within an organization.
I think what we could start this whole conversation with is the thought of the funnel. You've got the whole sales funnel, and the biggest distinction is marketing is the very tippy top of that funnel. We're supposed to fill the funnel, and then it pulls through sales where they actually make that final sale.
It's the operational aspect of it, right? So from a marketing perspective, our objective is to fill the top of the funnel to make the brand recognizable and to draw attention to the organization on the whole. And so salespeople are doing that as well. But for me, it's I would say the kind of that dividing line is in the one-to-one relationships versus the one-to-many relationships. And this might sound a little bit strange, but when I was in college, I sold real estate among other jobs and businesses, right? And so I feel like I honed my sales skills in a lot of different ways in a lot of different environments and scenarios, and I felt like I really had a great um, line on being a salesperson, and that one-to-one relationship is where I really shined. But as I started preparing for my master's degree, what I realized is that I needed to be able to speak to the masses. One-to-one is great, and you can go far in life with that skill set. But if I wanted to get to where I really wanted to be in life, I was going to need to be able to communicate with more people. And I found through the process of going through all of those marketing classes that it really is an art form in the way in which we communicate to the masses versus those individual emails. And even as you write email templates or other communications that you're going to use in your business, the way that I would speak to one particular client or one particular prospect is very different than the language I would use when I'm communicating to the masses, right? The
And
more people, more it changes.
absolutely. And that communication to the masses touches completely on that first bullet point there. What marketing is trying to nail down with all of the communication is making your brand, your company relevant,
Mhm.
making sure those touches are frequent so that people remember who you are, what the brand is, what it is about, and then authoritative, that the
Mhm.
brand actually knows what they're talking about. Your company is an expert in the space. And
Mhm.
those are all that top of the funnel umbrella ideas that people want to know in mass before you have that smaller one-on-one conversation.
I think as you look at those three areas, the relevant, frequent, and authoritative, it also ties us back to the search engine optimization. And where's
Mm-hmm.
the first place that everybody goes when they want information, right? They go generally to Google. And now
Yeah.
you are seeing more people that are starting to use Siri and other voice activated search. And that's something that we've started really taking a deeper look at, is how many people are using voice search to find the websites that we're building on behalf of clients. But Google's looking at these three things too: the relevancy, the frequency, and the authoritativeness of any particular post or website. And they actually have an algorithm that ranks us against each other to determine how they should display results in any given situation. And so when we talk about search engine result pages, or SERPs for short, that is all ultimately manipulated by Google's algorithms to try and provide you the most relevant content at any point in time. But they're also measuring us on how frequently things are being updated. How often are we saying things, right? If we're posting every day, that's one thing, and they're going to give us a different value for that frequency than if we post once a year or once every 3 years, right? Because if you
Mm-hmm.
only post once every 3 years or once a year, your pages, your website, your social media profiles start to look abandoned. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we kind of go down that path. But specifically to our industry, when we talk about that approaching of a narrow marketplace, we've got a really, I mean, it's a big world, but it's a really small world in receivables management. Everybody knows each other. It is a very, very small world. And in a very small world, your messaging must be crystal clear, or the rumor mill will take care of it for you. And so being able to specifically address concern situation, things that happen, and being out in front of that story, controlling that story and that news is incredibly important in
Mm-hmm.
terms of managing your brand.
And that's something you mentioned on a previous webinar. You said something along the lines of your reputation is the sum of what everybody thinks about you.
Mhm.
So managing that reputation comes from that content, comes from being authoritative, relevant, putting out that frequent information and responding to things as they come up. And that's huge for your reputation.
And I think what you said about out in front is key, because sometimes I think of it like the front door. Outside the front door, your business might be awesome inside, but
Mhm.
how are people going to see that if you're not out there, representing from the outside to draw them in?
Mm-hmm.
I think you draw a really good point there, right? And even as we talk about charitable contributions, right, and the management of charitable type content, which I know we've had this conversation internally, but I would like to point out that Katie actually writes more content for this industry than probably all other content sources combined. So her understanding of kind of how these things are how the vision of an organization is created through words is apparent as you walk around RMAI conference, for example, and see all of the work and pieces that she's drafted around the room. And I think this actually brings us to kind of our next point here, which is the limited skill sets from a single person. And so I think when we're talking about a salesperson and we're talking about a marketing team, a salesperson can be great, but they got to do follow-ups, they got to do sales calls, right? They got to, and if they're prospecting all of their leads and bringing all of their own leads to the table as well, they're only one person, right? And if you don't have if you've got one salesperson or two salespeople, chances are you don't have a marketing department to support them. And so, what does that start to look like? How much are you requesting or requiring of the salesperson? And can they ever really achieve and close deals if they are also having to prospect all their leads?
I want to chime in here with a little
Please.
bit of anthropology, because I am very passionate about history, archaeology, anthropology, that sort of stuff. And if you look at the beginning of all civilizations, the key to that is division of labor. That was the key to the start of civilizations, because if you have individuals trying to do everything all day, you don't have enough time to do things. But when they went, okay, this guy's going to make the bread so that this guy has time to make clothing, and this guy, suddenly a civilization is built. And you can think about that the exact same way with a company. That division of labor is so important to have experts in different areas, because quite frankly, as much as we'd like to be, we can't all be experts of everything. So having that is super critical to an organization.
Yeah, I think it's worth talking about because digital marketing has evolved really quickly. And, somebody might not necessarily be aware of all the delineation between sales and marketing and business development. But now, we're facing things like, attacks on brands online and things that get into skill sets that a traditional biz dev or salesperson may not have.
And even amongst that, hiring a single marketing person is also very difficult too, because just like you've got limitations to the sales side of things, you have limitations to the marketing side of things too. So how many different people, how many different skill sets are required to manage your brand? I can name 5 off the top of my head very easily, right? You've got web people, you've got social people, you've got content creators, you've got graphic designers, you're going to have search engine optimization professionals. And I mean, it just kind of goes on from there. And so as we look at trying to find a single person with all of those skill sets, it starts getting very expensive. And honestly, that's where our fractional marketing program ultimately was born from, because it was a need of the industry to get all of these skill sets, or a cross section of all of these skill sets, and to make it available for organizations. Because adding a marketing person to a debt buying company, like a full-time marketing person, unless you're a public company, is kind of a stretch. So being able to leverage that expertise and to be able to develop that expertise, I think, is incredibly important. Now, one other thing that we wanted to talk about here is kind of the tale of two decks. And this is something that people hear me talk about frequently. I've talked about this in countless presentations at conferences, webinars, podcasts, et cetera. So I'm going to talk about it one more time, because I truly believe that it's one of the things that is very unique about the receivables management space. And whether you're selling to a creditor, you're selling to debt buyers or agencies or law firms or whoever it is that you're selling to in this space, I find this to be pretty consistent. For me, as a sales and marketing professional in the space, when I'm talking to a client or a potential client, the chances that that person is actually the one who's going to make the decision is pretty low. The chances are that that person is not going to be ultimately making that decision. So I'm pitching somebody internally and I'm creating a champion for change, right? So in creating that champion, I'm presenting to them, and generally I'm going to do that through a presentation deck, which is going to have bullet points, right? Not fully formed sentences. It's going to be a lot of bullet points, and it's going to be all about conveying my message verbally and helping me to tell the storyline that needs to be told in my presentation, right? And looking at it from that perspective. Now, on the flip side, when that person, let's say that's the vice president of sales, Well, when that person goes up to pitch the CEO and CFO, how am I empowering them to be the champion for change in their organization? And unless I'm providing them with a more detailed deck that maybe says some of the things that I said in between the bullet points, right? That to me is the tale of two decks. It's that first version of it when I'm live presenting, and then a much more detailed version that my champion can use to invoke change and to use my language, my words. The chances after hearing my presentation once that they would be able to repeat it multiple times across their organization is zero. So empower them to do that, whether that be in video format, deck format. There's a lot of different ways that you can do that. Personally, I like to tell them to use our 5-minute pitch. Right. I did a 5-minute pitch video on receivables info. And when somebody's asking me for additional details or what kind of material could I use to help my CEO understand the value that you provide? Oh, hey, here's a quick 5-minute video that they can watch and I can truly convey my message. Probably a lot better than if the only thing that hit their desk was a handful of bullet points on a deck that they don't really care about and may never even print, right? This might just be something that they flip through real quick because executives are busy and they're not trying to spend a ton of time on one thing until you've developed some level of trust with them.
And you're definitely trying to avoid that game of telephone there. Like, have you ever heard a great joke and then went to try to tell somebody else that joke and you're like, no, wait, it was really funny, I promise you. Like, but
It's really funny when I heard it.
absolutely, but that's what can end up happening because you're like, oh, it was great and he explained it really good, but now it got lost in translation somewhere. So
We all played the game of telephone as kids, right? Like it is a very real scenario. I think we were being taught something through the game of telephone, and maybe from a sales and marketing perspective. Now, Katie, I think this is the area where you spend most of your time living is in the content world, right? And we always talk about the three audiences. Should we talk? Let's talk a little bit about kind of who the three audiences in the receivables management space are, and how difficult it really is to talk to all three of those audiences in the same sentence.
Yeah, so we always have to think about the different stakeholders of the consumers who may be reading and actually being, researching a company that because they're being collected on, and then the regulators who may be monitoring, and then of course clients, current and potential clients. So it can be tricky to address all of those at one time, especially if you don't have understanding of the nuances of the industry.
Agreed. I mean, you don't want to come out and say we collect the most money ever.
Right.
That's not sounding all that great,
And-
right? Like that sounds great to the client audience, but that does not sound good to the consumer or the regulator audience, right?
Yeah, and to be frank, there's times when, we're sifting through notes from our clients and we're going, okay, we're not going to say that. That's great. You can tell your clients that, but we can't put that on a website.
Yeah, agreed. Very much so. The to me, the three audiences has always been a challenge, right? But I think it's kind of what has made us special through the years is our ability to kind of understand who those three audiences are and what they ultimately want and need to be hearing about, but also being clear about what does not need to be said out loud because it does not come across or it is not interpreted as it's intended. And
Right.
that I
It's not
think
that it's
becomes the
wrong, but
problem.
it's misinterpretation. Yeah.
I think the
Avoiding
agency,
content landmines.
yeah, I feel like that's an article in and of itself, Katie.
Yeah.
Don't step on the landmines.
And a very difficult part of this is when you are talking to three audiences, we talk to a lot of different clients and they'll say, I have nothing to talk about. I don't know what to say about myself. And first of all, there's a ton of different things you can say, but then there also comes that concern of the three audiences with what can I say? Because they want to say, we collect the most money ever, but they're like, but we can't say that. Well, maybe you can't say that, but there are plenty of other things you can say. You can talk about events that you're going to. You can talk about current events and how that's affecting the industry with some thought leadership. You can talk about changes in your company, whether that be promotions, company events, or even changes in products and services. There is a wealth of knowledge that you have as an organization. And it comes down to building that content
Mhm.
to make that authority, that relevancy, and that frequency of content output to share who you are as an organization.
Yeah, and sometimes it works just like on the highway when you see billboards and it cements a brand in your head.
Mhm.
You know, you're on the information highway or whatever you want to think of it as, but just having your name out there is helping to cement that brand in people's head, and it's helping you to be searchable because, you know, more and more people are literally just searching keywords to find who they're going to work with or who they're going to interview to work with.
Think about it from a
Potentially.
consumer experience perspective. And I think as all the things that you guys talk about, I think it all ties back to when we say, what can we talk about? Talk about your consumer experience, right? Talk about how hard it is that you're working to provide the best possible experience for the end user consumer, all the different ways in which they can interact with you. And I think from a search engine optimization standpoint, you kind of hit the nail on the head there, because they're really, I mean, the fourth audience, I guess you could say, is Google. And Google is, you know, and I've been calling it the three audiences for a long time, but as we're sitting here talking about it, I'm starting to think about how much content, or how we've changed the way in which we draft content over time in order to accommodate. For those of you that don't know, there was 2 algorithm changes so far in the month of March. It is the 12th. The 12th. And we're already dealing with 2 algorithm changes from Google that are going to require changes to strategy, timing, relevancy. I mean, it's
And the crazy
wild to
thing
think
is,
about.
yeah, and they rarely tell you what the rules are. Because
Never
to them,
tell
that's
you.
like that's insider trading. So we'll tell you we made updates, but you got to go figure it out yourself. Go figure it out.
There's a multi-billion-dollar search engine optimization industry, multi-billion, between SEO and SEM, search engine optimization, and search engine marketing being the advertising portion of that. And so it's, why would they want to go blowing all of that up? And if they tell you what the rules are, you're just going to cheat. So what they're constantly trying to do is tell you the right way to do things. Focus on creating good content. Make sure that content meets these minimum viabilities, you know, and then over time, through testing, trial and error, we find the appropriate keyword densities, how frequently I should be saying branding arc in an article in order that it's not identified as keyword stuffing, and at the same time it's frequent enough to where I might actually rank for the terms in which I'm trying to rank in search. So there,
Mhm.
search is a whole other animal and a whole other ball game when it comes to the content and how it's ultimately being interpreted, because it's not a live person. And Google's ultimate, you know, goal here is to provide the most relevant content for any given search term. That's going to cause some challenges with their generative AI search algorithms. They're really starting to focus a little bit more on, like, discussion forums, right? They want uncurated discussion forums, which does not seem like it's not great for the industry, because it's allowing just angry people to say whatever they want without restriction. And there's no professional management or organization to how that's coming. So I'm interested to see how that continues to evolve. I did, during some testing a few months ago, actually get a taste of the generative AI search results. It only appeared for me for a couple of hours, and I tested the hell out of it when I had it available to me. What I learned scared me a little bit, but I think that's where we start working on continuing to create good content. I find us in a unique position to where, since the beginning of this organization, I've done nothing but do things the right way. And what I mean by that is I followed the instructions. I'm not trying to create, I never did keyword stuffing. I never started buying links. I never started doing some of these black hat SEO tactics that can cause problems. And so through the years, as we've gone through quite literally thousands of algorithm changes over the last 15 years, I never find myself cowering in a corner, because the content we write is great, and we're doing, you know, we're publishing it through the right channels and in the right ways. So I'm always looking for that next level of optimization without having to feel the fear of what happens when they find out what we did. And I got to
Mhm.
say, I'm quite proud of that, as an organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it can be frustrating and overwhelming sometimes with all the stuff with Google, but it's kind of cool because it is set up for people who are trying to do things right.
Mhm.
And
Or
what
try,
you
Agreed.
try to be. Mhm.
And what you were talking about with keyword stuffing, I feel like plays very well into our last bullet here about key messaging and not playing buzzword bingo. So what we mean about buzzword bingo is you can say, okay, I am a AI company, and you throw out all of these AI terms, and you can talk to me for 5 minutes about what you do in AI. And all you're doing is throwing buzzword after buzzword after buzzword after buzzword of AI. And it's like, great, we talked for 5 minutes, and I can tell you very honestly, I have no idea what you do. Because all you're doing is throwing out the buzzwords and trying to get a bingo of me going, oh, those are great buzzwords. I'm sold. So being very clear in your messaging and not just using the terms that you think are going to get you attention, but actually being intentional about your messaging, what you're saying, and the clarity of it is extremely important to your brand and to all of your content. Nobody wants to read an article that just goes in a spiraling circle because it's just a bunch of buzzwords.
I
Yeah,
agree
authority,
wholeheartedly.
quality, and relevance, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
Authority, frequency, and relevance. When it comes to the buzzword bingo, I actually worked the only company I ever worked for that I did not own. Our CEO would show up and give us these speeches, and they'd bring the whole company together, and we'd all have to sit through it. It was awful at best, and it got to a point where we actually started creating bingo cards. And so when we knew he was coming to town, we'd create a little bingo card with a bunch of random like hot button keywords that were either in the news right now or were heard around the industry, and then see how many of them he would say. And I mean, that's not a good thing, guys. Last year I personally decided I was going to walk around to all the booths at all the conferences that I was attending, as many as I could in reality, and just talk with people about what they do. I wanted to hear how people pitch their businesses. And I found that a lot of people, it was weird. A lot of people told me where they got funded before they even told me what it is that they did, or they told me what incubator they came from, or they're giving me all of this irrelevant information when they had about 30 seconds of my attention. And rather than telling me what they did, they told me how they were funded. And I got to be honest, across the receivable management space, nobody cares where you get your money. It's just not a relevant topic for us. What would have been relevant would have been explaining to me what the technology actually did and how it had an effect on the end users in front of us. Right. To me, that's the kind of information that I'm looking to be sharing. So just something to think about as you're kind of putting together your pitch and you're thinking about how you're talking about your organization. You can use a couple of keywords, but I think keeping it simple is always of additional value. Then we start talking about the online presence. So we've talked a little bit about the content itself, and now let's talk about some of the challenges that we're seeing out there from an online presence perspective. I feel like whether it be the website, the search engine optimization, or even the social media profiles, everybody's got some challenges out there across the receivables management space. What are
And
you
we've
guys
had
seeing from a search results perspective? Kind of start at the top here.
starting with search results, the SEO, we already touched on it, but how much it is a constant changing game. And it comes down to the smallest things like you were talking about, keyword stuffing. And for those who don't know what that is, that's when you have a piece of content, whether it's a page, article, and you keep throwing in, say, you're a pizza company as an example, and you just keep throwing in pizza, 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 everywhere. There is a threshold that you will hit where it is considered keyword stuffing, where Google suddenly goes, all right, you've said pizza way too much.
You're not even trying anymore.
Yeah, this might be an AI article that just said, hey, write pizza 1,000 times. There were also old tricks that people used for SEO, very old tricks. These are not possible anymore, where people would write in white on a white background and put pizza, 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 pizza on the white background on white so nobody could see it, but it was a way to try to trick the system. And that's kind of what search engine optimization has now blocked. It's like, okay, you can't do that. If you just say pizza 1,000 times, that's keyword stuffing. But you also want to say pizza enough that they know that you're a pizza company and not a makeup company or whatever it is. So
Fair.
a weird balance that you have to walk. So there's a lot of different nuances to SEO that a lot of people, I'm sure, struggle with out here.
I think from an organic defense standpoint is where we've generally started. And so a lot of the content that we create as an organization is focused on um, positioning a defensive and offensive strategy simultaneously. So talking about going to conferences, that's something that you can put out onto social. You could create an article if you really wanted to. Um, but there's other things that are more valuable there, right? Community involvement articles, for example, are incredibly powerful across the receivables management space. Not to give away any secret sauce, but for those of you watching, here's the secret sauce. Um, Go create articles that are about your engagement and involvement in your local community. If you're, making donations, if you're volunteering your time, if anybody in your organization is doing it, and even use it as an opportunity to showcase other people around your organization. Make an announcement. Hey, once a quarter, we're going to be supporting, whether it be $100, 200, whatever it doesn't have to be a dollar value even, but we're going to support a different charitable organization or a different community organization, every quarter. And who in our organization is passionate about something that you want us to get engaged in. To me, that's an employee engagement opportunity. You're engaging in your local community, and then let's talk about the SEO value, right? So you draft a quick article about that. You get that distributed to RMAI, ACA, Inside Arm, accountsrecovery.net, receivables info. I just named 5 off the top of my head that'll all publish that article. If you're assuming you're a member of those associations, we'll do that at no cost, right? So you're able to, they're looking for positive content about their members in the community, and they would love to do that. So now you're ultimately talking about, like, let's call it 5 different powerful incoming links that you're able to create, right? And those incoming links is ultimately what drives search engine optimization value, especially if those links are coming from frequently updated sites that are relevant and authoritative. You know who's authoritative in the receivables management industry? RMAI, ACA, NCBA, Inside Arm, accountsrecovery.net, right? Receivables info. So just by engaging in those things, I mean, that's how you can take one little piece of content and get a ton of value out of it, right? If you're going to pick the oranges, make sure you're squeezing them hard enough to get all the juice. And that is a nice, easy way for you to engage across multiple fronts simultaneously and add value to your organization while giving things away.
Yeah. I think it can be off-putting for some people because it's like tooting your own horn and everything. But I think the reality is that we're in a digital age, and maybe you may not have wanted to see it, but we're at the point now where part of running a business is paying attention to how you're showing up online. And this is a strategy that works.
I agree that a lot of people don't want to be out there just tooting their own horns and talking about their organizations. And I think that this industry has been very humble since its very beginnings. However, I also believe that if we don't do it, who will? And if we don't write positive content about our industry, then the only content that exists is talking about zombie debt and other irrelevant and non-existent things, relics from 20 years ago that make for great headlines. But that's the only way that you're going to find debt collection articles out there, unless we're willing to step up as an industry and talk about ourselves in the positive light in which we deserve, because we are an essential part of the credit ecosystem. Without debt collection, interest rates rise, availability of credit drops, right? There's a lot of problems that come with our industry not being able to function. And those are the unintended consequences that I often think regulators and legislators often overlook.
And ultimately, we're people. And we have things that we're passionate about. We do care, and being able to share that, being able to share things you're super passionate about. Like I've seen organizations donate to orphanages or cancer institutes because it's something close to their heart, whether they were adopted or they have somebody close to them or themselves had cancer. It comes down to actually just being people and having that genuine piece of you. And I think that kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, Katie, about You can be fantastic inside that house with that door closed, where everybody in there is passionate and caring. But unless you open the door or, open a window and let anybody in to see any of that, nobody knows. Nobody knows. And then we become blank organizations, blank face organizations where they're like, oh, it's just a big corporation. They don't care. There's no people there. It's a soulless. And that's
Right.
furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah. And that box of what people are going to say, what people are going to hear is going to exist.
Mhm.
So you either fill it or someone's going to fill it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Either you participate, the conversation is going to happen. You can choose to participate in the conversation, or you can choose not to, but the conversation is going to continue forward. And I think as you participate in the conversation, it's important for receivables firms not to be apologetic and not to be on the defensive. I think it's important that the language be assertive and approachable. I always tell people that it should be our goal as the receivables management industry to be approachable financial institutions, right? We are financial institutions as step buyers, but we still need to be approachable. We need to be institutional enough to be respected, but approachable enough that we're not scary and unable to communicate or, in that nobody wants to reach out to us. It's a fine line, right? Like there's a delicate balance between those two worlds. And I think the most successful organizations in our space have really refined their position from that perspective.
And that's a perfect segue into websites, because being approachable, part of that is having that online presence, because we're in a digital age now. Not having the ability to look up your company and understand who you are when somebody gets a phone call, a letter, whatever it is, immediately makes you not approachable. The door is closed. You're
Less
completely closed
trustworthy
off.
too. Yeah.
You lose all of those things, that reliability, that accessibility, all of that is closed off if you don't have that website. It is literally the cornerstone of your presence, and it is the only marketing and salesperson that works 24/7 for you. It is up there marketing for you, helping sell for you. And it's ultimately what most other aspects of your presence points back to. You get a flyer, well, learn more, go to our website. You got social media, what is it linked to? Back to your website. It is the cornerstone of your digital presence.
It's a lot of times it's the first impression.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So from a consumer, like let's look at the consumer experience for a second. Consumer receives a legally required letter from a collection agency or debt buyer. Okay. I get my letter, open it up, I look at it. Oh, XYZ says that I owe a debt. What am I going to do? Am I just going to cut a check? No, I'm either going to go visit their website or I'm going to search them online. Chances are I'm going to search them online before I actually go directly to the website that's been provided to me in the letter, because easily manipulated. So the first thing I'm going to do is go do a Google search, and what I see there has a direct impact on my understanding of that organization. My opinion of that organization will be directly affected by the search results first. Then I'm going to go to their website and I'm going to start clicking around. And then the second impression of their organization is going to be their website itself. Now, on that first impression, if I go and I search for that organization and all I see is don't pay these people, sue them, they're a scam, what am I going to do next? Am I going to call them and be like, hey, would you take my credit card information, please? No, chances are I'm going to try and avoid them like they're the plague. Oh, these guys are a scam. Let me block them in every way possible, right? I'm just trying to be realistic about how I would behave in the same situation. So I think kind of having, working on your communications and um, having a clean presence online for your business would completely change that scenario. Because now as a consumer, I go on there and I see that this is a trustworthy organization. It's a financial institution and they appear to be approachable. Maybe I'm going to reach out to them and have that conversation. Right, I'm going to go check out their website. Oh, okay, it's secure. Everything looks good. All right, let me give these people a call. Let me call the phone number on their website. Because I may be more inclined to talk to somebody that I called than if somebody called me and started asking for information, right? Because then I don't really know who just called me or from where. You can tell me you're from Dell, but I don't know that unless I called Dell. And again, call that the paranoid data security professional in me, but that's the way I would look at it. And I have to assume that there's a lot of smart consumers out there that would look at it in a very similar fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we
And
talk about the, go ahead.
there's two other aspects to that approachability for your website, those being the ADA accessibility and mobile optimization. Now, I know that this statistic has since changed, but I believe a little while ago it was over 60%, and now I think it's closer to 80% of people searching currently are on mobile. So you can have a great site built, but if it is not optimized for mobile, people try to look at it and they're like, I can't even tell what I'm looking at. The images are all messed up. The text is weird. And suddenly you've lost your chance at making a good first impression, which is so important. The other one being ADA accessibility. And we've talked about it a couple of times on different webinars, but there was the case Robles versus Domino's. And it was a big case because what essentially happened is somebody tried to order a pizza and Domino's did not make it ADA accessible for them.
Yeah.
So they had difficulty and they said, hey, Domino's, I can't order a pizza on your site. And the court said, yep, that's got to be a thing that you have to make for everyone. So this should be something that every single person who has a site has. Because if you don't have it, it doesn't matter what you're selling. You could be selling toothpaste. If you are not ADA accessible, you could be hit with a lawsuit.
That particular lawsuit was Domino's ended up paying $19 million for being ADA inaccessible. But the other thing to kind of point out about that accessibility portion there, from the government's perspective, that court case changed what changed the definition of public accommodations. And so the Americans with Disabilities Act did not apply online up until 2019. It applied like in a store, places of public accommodation, right? A store, restaurant, right? A place where the public would come and visit you. Now that applies to any online property. That could be an app. And with the accessibility tools that are built into the devices versus those that are built into websites versus those that are built to or coded specifically to it, there's some really fine lines in there. I can tell you from my experience in kind of monitoring some of the quote unquote consumer attorneys out there, this is a hot button issue that they are trying to generate opportunities for themselves to sue debt collectors on behalf using the ADA rules. Now, some of them they're not going to get very far because I know a lot of you out there have your site set up and fully accessible, and you'll be good to go there because you're getting your quarterly reports and life is good. The rest, something you got to consider. It is something that really needs to be considered when you're talking about your website, and is that accessibility something that is fully functional on our site. I do want to run back up to an earlier bullet point here because there's one point that I think is really important for us to make from a defensive standpoint. And so we talk about organic defense being, content that we're creating in order to hold pieces of real estate in the search engine results. So you go into Google, you type in the words that you want to search, and boom, it's going to display the search results. At the top of those search results are the ads, right? Those are the Google ads somebody's paying on an auction style bid every time that you do that search, right? In order to be the person or the organization or the link that's displayed at the top, right? And then you have your organic results below that. So our experience has been that once you, let's say that we start working with a new client in the receivable space and they've got a whole bunch of negativity on there from some of these quote unquote consumer attorneys. Well, these consumer attorneys are ultimately, once they get beaten from an organic standpoint and their website won't allow them to freely generate leads, of consumers that really haven't been harmed, now they're going to start running paid ads. So once you beat them organically, they will start spending some money. I can give you the list of the 5 that are going to do it. I know exactly what they're going to bid. And, obviously we're monitoring that for a number of clients. But I think that's something that we need to consider, that even after you win this organic battle, there's another battle that follows right behind it. And defending your reputation and is one of the most important things you can do for a receivables management firm. And I use 2 different analogies when I'm explaining this to people. One is that the search engine result is like a monopoly board. right? And in this case, I don't just need to control Park Place and Boardwalk. I need to hold the whole side. I need all those green properties, Pennsylvania, whatever it is. I need the railroads. I need the utilities. I need the whole side of the board, because if I've got one piece of property on that board that I don't control, that's a problem for my client. So I have always kind of looked at it from a monopoly standpoint, right? Like I just feel like that is a great analogy for ultimately what we're trying to do here. Then from an advertising standpoint, once you win, now you are in a game of auctions. And so setting a strategy within your auctions and making sure that your content is frequent, relevant, authoritative, making sure that the words and language that you're choosing in the ads is correct, and then building out your campaigns appropriately is really all you can do to defend yourself against that style of an attack. Generally, what I recommend is, throw some money at it, like put some money into those ads and make sure that you can knock them back, demonstrate to the attackers that I'm here to play ball. And generally, they're going to go after the low hanging fruit that are not fighting back. But if you continue to allow yourself to be a low hanging fruit, you will eventually get gobbled up.
Mhm.
Yeah, you may not want to engage in the fight, but the fact is, if you don't, you're just going to sit there and get hit.
Well, the sooner you start defending yourself, the better off you're going to be, right? I always look at the website and the online presence like a castle, right? And I want to dig a moat around my castle to keep all my people inside safe, right? But I can't dig a moat if I'm already under attack. I got to do that when things are calm. I got to build out that content. I got to build out the defenses. I have to prepare to defend my castle before I'm under attack. If I have to dig that moat while I'm being attacked, it's going to take a lot more effort, which is going to be a lot more expensive, right? And you're dealing with a very different animal at that point. So just something to consider for those of you that are looking to actually defend your business's reputation from those attackers. And then it ties into what we're talking about here from a social media perspective as well, right? Because that's kind of the third leg of your social presence.
So one of the things we have here is abandoned profiles. And you may not have necessarily fully abandoned your profile, but if you are, and I'm going to use an example that I've actually seen recently, posting maybe only once or twice a year, and those posts aren't even necessarily relevant. For example, this particular company had posted twice, and it was sort of within the same year, almost within 2 years, just saying we're hiring on Facebook. So not even on a LinkedIn area. So you got to be thinking about what you're posting, how much you're posting, and that goes back to frequency, relevancy, and authority. If you're trying to hire, you want to go to some place like LinkedIn, you want to be more frequent, getting your name out there. Like Katie said earlier, if you're driving the content highway, you want to see your name on several different billboards, even if that's a holiday post or a we're going to this event, keeping yourself out there. And then more of that authority by having different, you can do expertise articles, you can do videos, you can have things published by, like we were saying earlier, the different associations or news organizations within the industry. Keeping your online social presence active is extremely important to that overall profile of your business, essentially.
100%. And go check who controls your profiles, right? Who actually set up and currently manages each one of your profiles? How many times have we started a new project, gone in and found out that an employee from 20 years ago actually created that profile and the business doesn't have access to it?
Yeah. And I think it's worth mentioning too, not just the audience of consumers online, but now of employees or candidates seeking employment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even back when I first was looking for jobs and I ended up at Investinit, I remember Googling them. And now, and maybe that was somewhat unusual, but to dig and try to find whatever I could. But now anybody's going to do that. Like somebody 10 years younger than me, that's just a standard of what they're going to do. So I feel like a theme of this whole thing is if you don't realize all of this is a staple of doing business now, it's time to realize it because that's where we are. And it's not just the people you're serving, but now it's also the people you're hiring are going to expect a certain elevated presence if they're going to be proud to work there.
You make some really good
Absolutely.
points, right? Like you make some really good points.
If I was approached by a company, or even I was looking at a job posting on Indeed and I was interested, and I went to look up their website, and first there wasn't a website, there's no job, in my opinion. I'm immediately like, oh, this is not real. Second option, there is a website, but it's either extremely outdated or extremely poorly done. I start questioning, is this a scam? Is this a really poorly run organization? There's immediately, again, I'm no longer interested in that organization. So there is absolutely that first impression that hits new hires.
Most receivables management firms are trying to accomplish three things with their website. They're trying to collect more payments, hire better people, and defend their reputation. And so I think if you look at it through that lens and you're always looking at how to achieve one of those three objectives, it really does get a lot easier to manage your social presence. It gets a lot easier. Now, as we kind of roll into our final minutes here, and as our resident event expert, I wanted to talk a little bit, especially since both of you ladies both attended your first RMAI conference with Branding Arc this year. Let's talk a little bit about event management and some of the things that people and organizations can be doing to improve their overall experience at live events.
So event management is massive. There is so much to it, starting with what events are even relevant for you to go to. And then if you're going to go to them, all right, are you going to sponsor? Are you going to exhibit? Are you going to just attend? And why might one of those be good at one event and not good at another event? So there's a ton to even decide before you get to the event. Say you're exhibiting. How big of an exhibit are you going to bring? And why do you want to have a
How are you going to get it there?
For demos. Are you going to get it there? Right.
Absolutely. And then you got to think, okay, well, I've got a booth and we've got the table. Oh, well, now we need literature. Now we need swag. Is the swag going to be relevant? And even from there, how much do you have to order? Well, how many people are attending? There are so many items that go into the logistics of events. And clearly I'm very passionate about it. But you want to go there with your A game. And then once all of that is figured out, you've picked the event, you've picked what you're doing for the event, and you're going to go, then people are like, oh, we're all set. Well, you're missing the actual experience of the events and the planning for that. And that comes to our first bullet point here. Big example, if you have not been to these events before, you may not know wearing comfortable shoes is key. RMAI last month being a big example, I have the step tracker, and I was averaging 12,000 or more steps a day out in Vegas. You don't want to be wearing heels. As cute as they look with my pantsuit, it's never going to happen. You got to wear flats, you got to wear comfortable shoes, and that's just part of the functionality of events.
I feel like that's one of those things that everybody, nobody thinks about it until their first event. But anybody who actually listens to that, Steve Cohen has been shouting this from the rooftops for like 15 years. And I think people give him a hard time sometimes when he's given that presentation, like they're like, well, 12,000 steps a day. That is I mean, it takes like over 5 minutes to walk from the casino floor to the conference area. Like, and you're doing that multiple times. Like it's a constant back and forth in between meetings and on your feet. And forget even beyond how much you were walking, how much you were standing, right? Whether you're standing in the booth, whether you're standing in a meeting, or standing in the hallway talking to somebody, like you are on your feet for like 4 or 5 days straight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was definitely eye-opening to me going and just watching Kat unroll the banners and set that stuff up. I mean, that's a huge part of how the industry functions, is getting out there and doing these booths and stuff. But there's a whole lot to that I wasn't even aware of.
It's true.
And then making sure all of the attendees of the event understand what's going on for the event, what industry events are happening. Like we had the what was it, the tailgate party at RMAI, and knowing all those different things, where to be at the right time. Also knowing like where can you take meetings. It's very intricate. There's so much
calendar management. I mean, There's a lot of it, right? And it's about getting those appointments scheduled. We ended up executing on 40 plus meetings over 4 days, which is rather insane. I don't suggest that people try and stuff their calendar like that, but we had a lot to accomplish this year. So I think there's, time management is essential. Knowing when to be in, when to be out, and knowing how to draw attention to yourself at a conference, right? Are you going to attend, sponsor, or exhibit, or a combination of these things? And what's that ultimately going to cost you?
And what you were saying about the time management, also just again, trying to understand the event itself and the location is extremely important, because if you're trying to take however many meetings a day, say that breaks down to about 10 meetings a day, and you're trying to run from the exhibit to go meet somebody in a bar, you may not have the 10 minutes in between there. So there's a lot to think about with not just the time, but the location, and making sure that every piece of that puzzle fits together.
So, ladies, coming into our final moments of today's presentation, I want to thank both of you for coming on and having a chat with me today. I know this is something we talk about, these subjects on a regular basis as a group, as an organization, and as friends. But it's nice to have you guys come on and kind of discuss these things in the open forum, because I think it's important that people start to see just how deep the rabbit hole goes when it comes to managing your events, managing your marketing, the thought process that goes into content creation, and all of the other things that are being done as an organization. So I really wanted to thank you guys for coming on today. Any final words of wisdom that you would leave for our audience today?
Maybe we can just click to the last slide so people who are curious can see the 5th point that we didn't get to. So you can just screenshot it and think about it. If you have any questions based on this slide, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to chat about it. Sorry we ran out of time.
100%. We can always come back again and do one specifically about logos and branding, and kind of continue on with the conversation, because I really enjoyed time with you ladies today.
Thank you. It was great.
Thanks, Adam.
For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions you'd like to ask the team, you can leave those in the comments on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll be responding to those. But until next time, everybody, thank you so much for your time and attention today. We'll see you all again soon.
Thank you.